Canada's rate of inflation hit 4.4% last month, the highest in almost 2 decades. Justin Chandler covers the Hamilton-Niagara region for Ontario Hubs. He's been working on how that affects people who rely on the Ontario Disability Support Program, also known as ODSP. And he joins us now from Hamilton for more. Hey, Justin.
Hey, Jan.
All right, so before we begin, let's make sure we all know what we mean by inflation. Here is a quick primer. What is inflation? Inflation is the rising costs of goods and services, and it means just about everything you buy costs more. But how is it determined? In Canada, inflation is measured by something called the Consumer Price Index. The CPI compares the costs of goods and services today to the costs of those same goods and services a year before. The increase is the rate of inflation. Households spend money on everything from groceries, clothing, and entertainment to big-ticket purchases such as cars. The Consumer Price Index can't track every purchase. Instead, it uses a virtual shopping basket of about 700 goods and services Canadians typically buy. Each item is given a different weight, depending on how frequently households purchase it. So groceries are weighted more than things purchased less often, like haircuts. A moderate rate of inflation can encourage spending, but rapidly increasing inflation makes goods unaffordable and can have a serious impact on the economy. In 1991, the Canadian government and the Bank of Canada started to set inflation targets to keep the economy in balance, following 2 decades of unstable inflation and unsustainable costs of living. The Bank of Canada raises or lowers its interest rate to try to reach that set target. The current inflation target in Canada is set at 2%. All right, Justin, let's talk about your article for TVO.org. You quote a McMaster University study about how people on social assistance are faring during the pandemic. What did you find in that?
So this was a very interesting study that McMaster did. It was based on a survey of about 800 people. And they asked all sorts of questions about COVID-19, about finances, about people's thoughts on government. And what they found repeatedly was that people on Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Program payments, people who are reliant on that, they were consistently having some of the worst outcomes when it came to their financial stability, when it came to their health, as compared to people who were receiving the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit or to people who were not receiving any government supports. So I guess an example of this would be half of people on OW or ODSP reported that they had no food to eat some days, whereas 1 in 10 CERB respondents said that, and 1 in 20 people who had no support who responded to the survey said that.
Now you mentioned OW. Want to clarify Ontario Works and ODSP,
Yes.
The Ontario Disability. So I want to actually pull up one of these quotes that you mentioned in your article. You spoke to one person who described something known as Hell Week. What does that actually mean?
Yes, this was something that I learned through Andrea Hatala. She's in Toronto. She's a musician. She's also lives on ODSP. And what she told me was that the last week in the calendar month before people get their next check is called Hell Week. And this is because it's the week that people have to make the most crushing and difficult decisions about their finances. When the money's running dry and when people have to decide whether they're going to eat or pay for medication or just how they're going to get by.
Now, there is a big discrepancy between the cost of living right now and how much people receive on the Ontario Disability Support Program. Currently, what is the rate? What does someone get at the end of the month? And are there plans to increase that?
So with the caveat that these rates change based on a person's situation, the maximum amount that a person can receive is about $1,169 for a single person, and that's assuming that they don't have other sorts of benefits or a different situation. But let's assume it's that. The cost of living is much higher than getting that much per month. I think, as everybody knows, most people's rent would be completely eaten up by that. But the rates have not gone up since 2018. The government did not directly respond to a question that I asked about whether the rates would go up, which leads me to believe, at least at this point, there are no public plans for them to do that.
Early in the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure on food banks and other programs to sort of fill that gap. 20 plus months later, are we still seeing that sort of trend? Have we seen, what are we seeing in there?
We are, yeah. Actually, in that McMaster survey, over a quarter of respondents who were on OW and ODSP said that they were making more use of food banks. But even now, I spoke to somebody at the Hope Center in Welland, and they're still seeing, as of September at least, an 8% increase year over year in food bank usage. And they're worried that as more federal income supports start to wind down, that's going to result in maybe a 30 to 40% increase.
Now, we've talked about this on this program before. People on CERB, and that's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, early on in the pandemic, received substantially more. It was about $2,000 per month in comparison to the $1,169 that you would be receiving from ODSP. Does this make an argument to increase ODSP payments? Does this put any pressure that, hey, this blanket number of $2,000 was created to help people get through the pandemic, yet there have been people who have been surviving on less than that for quite a while?
Well, certainly a lot of people are making that argument. This is something that I repeatedly heard while reporting this article. Now, one thing I should note, Andrea said that one thing she wants people not to do is try to argue sort of over who had it worse. So there's nobody saying that people on CERB should not have received this amount of money. They're just saying that perhaps this represents the federal government acknowledging that that's at least a minimum amount that people need to survive. And that if that's a minimum amount, then ODSP would be a sub-minimum amount.
Now, you spoke to someone from the ODSP Action Coalition, and they, as an organization, have a list of demands to sort of spark solutions. Can you give us some of those solutions that they're asking for?
Yes, they've got 8 up on their website. These include sort of limiting the amount increasing the amount that a person can earn before their income is deducted. This also includes trying to index to the rate of inflation so that ODSP payments go up more. Also making it more accessible, increasing the amount that people get for housing. So there's a whole lot of different ones here. But one of those biggest ones is just raising the rates.
Very quickly, I do want to ask you, there was a quote in your piece that read, "In poverty, you're sort of obsessed with the fact that you have no money and obsessed with ways to get by." This was a quote from Andrea Hatala. Does she hold out hope that her situation can improve, and many others as well?
So this is one of those stories where after you talk to somebody and you hear about these things, like after she's talking about Hell Week, where I was just saying to her, like, well, thank you for talking to me. I know this is difficult. And she said, well, the only way this gets better is if we talk about it. And she said, maybe there's not an easy solution here, but really people can put their heads together, and we need to make sure that people who need it are getting the supports that they need to live well.
Thank you so much, Justin. A very important story, and I'm sure we will continue to follow.
Take care.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.